it's not that long ago that each town and village had around it a ring of market gardens and orchards. And that's where a lot of the fruit and the vegetables came from. And yet now, here in Britain, we import 93% of our fruit is imported from outside the UK. Only 7% of it is grown in the UK. And this is a country where we used to, I'm standing in Kent, the Garden of England, famous for its orchards. Where have they all gone? We need to bring that food production back, because one of the things that this supermarket model has given us is we have the fastest rate of food inflation in Europe is in the UK. This model that was supposed to deliver cheap food is doing nothing of the sort. And related to that, of course, we have the growth of food banks. And there are now, and this is a figure from Oxfam, so it's a very conservative figure, there are now, this week, at this moment, 500,000 people in Britain dependent on food banks to eat. 500,000 people who, and you listen to people who work in food banks, and I've visited a few of them, and they say, people arrive, they arrive crying. They arrive when they've been hungry for days, and the teacher at the school notices that their parent looks really faint and the kids seem hungry, and says, hey, you need help, here's a food bank voucher, go and do it. People are in a really desperate state before they even get to the food banks. And that's where we're at, where our current economic model has delivered us. So, we have to change. And that is really simply the message I think the Green Party delivers. Our current economic model is broken economically, it's broken socially, and it's broken environmentally. And sadly, if we think about the politics of Britain, at the moment we have the three largest political parties basically treading on each other's toes, trying to occupy the same political space. And it's a political space that's been defined by the past politics. It's a political space that's defined by the old idea of there's the swing voters in the swing seats. And if you're going to win government, you've got those couple of 100,000 people in those swing seats, and you've got to focus all your policies on those. And that means you've got to keep the Daily Mail sweet. You've got to keep the Telegraph sweet. You've got to keep Sky Television sweet. And yet, really clearly, our political model is broken as well, if it's producing that sort of politics. Because what I find on the doorsteps up and down the country, not just in poorer places, but in wealthier places too, people are starting to get that the model is broken. They mightn't put it in quite those terms, they mightn't quite be sure where they're at, but they're sort of saying, I don't think that what any politicians, mainstream politicians are saying, they don't seem to have any answers. And that's something that people are saying up and down the country, from every sort of demographic all around the country. And so we have a huge job, because we are the only large political party saying that this is broken, that we need to do things like make the minimum wage a living wage. We need to renationalise the railways. And I can tell you exclusively, unless you've been watching Twitter, that Caroline this morning announced that she's bringing a private member's bill to renationalise the railways. And I'm told that may have been the loudest cheer that anything got this morning at the People's Assembly. And it's interesting, because I was talking last week at a media reform rally, and an academic speaker talking about media ownership was saying how hard it is to get things like renationalise the railways into the media. And I said, yes, we know it's really hard to get into the media. And yet, that's a policy that has around about 75% public support. And yet, you're radical if you say that. Or we can't report that, it's a bit much to say that. So, we've got a huge job to do as the Green Party. But the good news is that it's not just us. I'm afraid I only came in on the end of the women's session, but one of the things I was hearing was how many people there have other links as well. Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace. And so I'd like to talk about us as the political wing of what I call the small G Green movement. And that means everybody from Occupy and UK Uncut, through Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, to the RSPB and the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. They might not always know that, but hey, it's true. We agree with them on lots of things. So we're part of a whole big movement, and what we've got to do is join with that movement. We've got to get out there on the doorsteps, knock on people's doors, get into the local media, get the message across, because we have out there a hugely receptive public, a public that, round about in 2010 with the general election, people were still thinking like, oh, well, 2007, 8, you know, economic crash, we know these happen, and things just recover and we'll go back on the path we were before. But I think people increasingly realise that we're not going back onto the path we were before. We need to choose new paths. And we as the Green Party, I believe, need to help lead on those new paths. And let's all do it together. Thank you.